There is a peculiar kind of liberation that arrives, not with thunder, nor with grand declarations, but with silence. An exhale so deep that it seems to unravel every tightly held thread within your soul. It is the moment you finally let go, and not the kind of letting go we romanticize in stories or chant during spiritual retreats, but the real thing, the raw, disorienting, terrifying surrender where you unclench your fists not because you're ready, but because you're exhausted from holding on. You stop fighting not because you've lost hope, but because you've realized hope itself had become another chain. Letting go is misunderstood. We often think it means defeat, weakness, failure, but that's the language of the mind, not the whisper of truth. The mind wants to manage, to categorize, to control. It wants answers, justice. It wants to rehearse the story of how we were wronged or what could have been. The mind plays the game of grasping. It clings to identities, to memories, to illusions of certainty. And yet the soul, the soul longs to flow, not to grip. It longs to be like the river, moving without asking why the rock is in its path. So what happens when you finally let go? At first you may feel as if you're falling, as if the very foundation beneath your feet has disappeared. And in a way it has. The structure you built out of fear, out of expectation, out of longing, is dissolving. But what you discover in that terrifying descent is something extraordinary. There is no bottom. There is no crash. There is only space. Vast, open, silent space. You don't fall. You float. And in that space, you meet something that's been waiting for you all along. Yourself unburdened. Letting go is not passive, it's not resignation. It is a profound act of courage, a willingness to stand naked before the mystery of life and say, I no longer need to know. It is to walk into the unknown not with a map, but with trust. And trust is not built in comfort. It is forged in fire, the fire of loss, of pain, of unraveling. That's why most people never truly let go. They want the transformation, but not the burning. They want to fly, but fear the surrender of gravity. And yet life is astonishing in its generosity. When you finally let go, not just with your hands, but with your heart, life responds. What once seemed blocked begins to open. What once was chaotic starts to harmonize. Not because life has changed, but because you have. You are no longer dragging yesterday into today. You are no longer demanding the future arrive on your terms. You become receptive, like the earth after a long drought. You begin to notice things, subtle things, the way the sunlight moves through your window, the softness of breath, the miracle of a moment without resistance, subtle, waiting to happen, without resistance. Relationships shift. Some fall away effortlessly, revealing they were only held together by your unwillingness to release. Others deepen because you no longer need them to complete you. You begin to see love not as something to acquire, but something to recognize in yourself. And peace, real peace, emerges not because life is perfect, but because you're no longer insisting that it should be. When you let go, even time feels different. You're no longer racing. You're no longer measuring your worth by what you've achieved or what you've failed to fix. You begin to live in rhythm, not in pressure. You start to hear the music beneath the noise, the silence that sings between moments. And you realize everything you were chasing was never outside you. It was always waiting inside the stillness you refused to touch. So watch what happens when you finally let go. Watch how life surprises you, not with what you expected, but with what you never knew you needed. Watch how the heaviness lifts, not because the burden vanished, but because you stopped calling it yours. Watch how you return to yourself, not the self you tried to build, but the self that was always whole, always wise, always free. Letting go is one of the most misunderstood experiences in human life. To the untrained mind, it appears as weakness, a concession of defeat, a final white flag in a long, painful battle. But beneath that surface perception lies a deeper truth, one that most never touch because they are too busy clinging. Letting go in its truest and most authentic form is not weakness at all. It is, in fact, the beginning of real strength. It is the first glimpse of inner freedom, a freedom that does not depend on circumstances, validation, or certainty. It is a freedom that comes only when you have dared to step away from the illusion of control. We are raised to believe that to hold on is to be brave. We are taught that perseverance means tightening our grip, refusing to surrender, pushing through even when it hurts. And in many situations, that persistence has value. But what happens when the thing we are holding onto is decaying, dead, or never truly meant for us? What if the effort to keep something alive is what's slowly killing us? Holding on can sometimes be a disguised form of fear. It becomes the armor we wear to avoid the discomfort of emptiness, uncertainty, and the unknown. And yet, in that same unknown lies our liberation. There comes a moment, quiet and often without warning, when the soul whispers, "It's time." It is not the voice of reason. It is not loud or demanding. It does not provide guarantees. It doesn't lay out the next steps or offer a roadmap. It simply asks you to trust, to unclench your fists and release your grasp on something you once believed was essential to your existence. This might be a person, a dream, a version of yourself, or even a belief that shaped your identity. And in that moment, you are confronted with the terrifying possibility that by letting go, you might lose everything. But what you're actually losing is only the illusion of control. Control has been our security blanket, our armor, our compass. We use it to build identities, to protect ourselves from pain, to script a future that feels safe. But the irony is that control is the most fragile thing we possess. Life has never been in our control, not fully, not really. We try to hold it in place with routines, relationships, plans, and expectations. But life is water. It flows. And when we try to contain it, it spills through our fingers. When we try to freeze it, it loses its vitality. True peace arises when we stop trying to grip the current and instead let it carry us. Not aimlessly, but with the awareness that we don't need to know where we're going to trust where we are. Letting go is the opposite of passive. It is not doing nothing. It is doing the hardest thing of all, choosing not to interfere, choosing not to manipulate, choosing not to beg life to obey our will. It's active surrender, rooted in a deep understanding that what is truly meant for us cannot be lost, and what is not meant for us cannot be forced to stay. And this act of surrender does not arise from giving up. It arises from waking up to the realization that we've been gripping so tightly that we've lost the ability to feel, that we've been trying so hard to protect ourselves that we've missed the beauty of vulnerability, that we've been so consumed by what we might lose that we've forgotten what we still have. And what begins to unfold once we let go is a kind of quiet magic. The burden you didn't even know you were carrying starts to lift. The heaviness in your chest lightens. The thoughts that looped endlessly in your mind begin to slow down. The need to explain yourself disappears. The fear of judgment, rejection, or failure begins to melt away, not because you've solved every problem, but because you've stopped identifying with them. You begin to see life not as something to conquer, but as something to experience. The weather of your emotions passes through you instead of defining you. You are no longer a prisoner to your circumstances because you no longer demand that they validate your worth. Letting go also transforms how we relate to others. When we stop holding people hostage to our expectations, we free them and ourselves. We stop needing them to be a certain way in order to feel okay. We stop trying to change, fix, or control them. We begin to love more purely, not because we are attached, but because we are free. We begin to understand that love is not about possession or permanence. Love is presence. And presence can only exist where control has been relinquished. But perhaps the most profound transformation that letting go offers is the return to ourselves. The self beneath the striving. The self before the stories. The self that doesn't need to be approved of, understood, or admired to know it is whole. This self has always been here, but it has been buried under layers of fear, pain, and performance. And when you let go, truly let go, you create space for that self to rise. You discover a stillness you didn't know existed, a sense of home you never knew you were missing. And in that stillness, you realize the things you thought you needed were never the source of your peace. They were distractions from it. To let go is not to lose, it is to come home. It is to trust that life is wiser than your plans and kinder than your fears. It is to open your hands, your heart, and your spirit and say, I am ready for what is, even if I don't understand it. And that simple act, the willingness to stop clinging, is the first true step toward freedom. Not freedom from the world, but freedom within it. A kind of freedom that cannot be taken because it was never given by anything outside you. It was always yours, waiting to be found the moment you finally loosened your hold. There's a strange fear that grips the heart when we stand on the edge of letting go. It feels like approaching a cliff with a vast and infinite drop below. The mind panics, imagining all the worst-case scenarios, all the ways you might shatter if you take that step. And so you hesitate, you stall, you look back, convincing yourself that maybe holding on just a little longer will make it all make sense. But what if the fall you're so afraid of is not a fall at all? What if what awaits you isn't destruction? This is where the paradox lies. We spend so much of our energy fearing collapse, fearing what will happen if we lose control, if we release our grip on the situation, the person, the idea, the past. But the collapse is not the catastrophe we think it is. It is the collapse of illusion. It is the breaking down of the mental prison we've unknowingly constructed brick by brick. When we finally dare to let go, what falls away is not who we are, but everything we were never meant to carry in the first place. The ego resists this deeply. The ego, which survives by comparison, competition, and control, equates surrender with annihilation. It believes that without the scaffolding of pride, attachment, identity, and certainty, we will simply vanish. But the soul whispers another truth. You are not falling. You are being held. You are not losing yourself. You are meeting yourself in a way you never have before. The reason it feels like falling is because you are no longer anchoring your worth to external things. You're no longer tied to outcomes, roles, or expectations. You're drifting away from the surface layers of your being into something quieter, softer, more vast. Imagine a bird that has spent its entire life in a cage. The door is open, but it stays perched inside. It doesn't know what the wind feels like on its wings. It has grown accustomed to the safety of the familiar walls. It's been told the sky is dangerous, unpredictable, too vast to navigate. And so it remains where it is, not because it can't fly, but because it doesn't yet trust its ability to do so. This is what it means to fear letting go. It is the fear of our own wings, the fear of our own capacity for peace, for joy, for freedom. And yet, the moment comes when the soul can no longer be contained. The grief, the confusion, the frustration of trying to make something work that was never meant to last becomes too heavy. And in that moment, when you finally say, I'm done, not out of bitterness, but out of a quiet knowing, you experience the fall, or so it seems. But instead of crashing, something unexpected happens. You begin to rise, not in the way you thought, not with noise or celebration, but with silence, with lightness, with a kind of peace that doesn't need explanation. There is a weightlessness that follows surrender, a sense that you are no longer fighting reality. You're no longer trying to reshape what has already occurred. You're no longer resisting what life is trying to teach you. And in that release, you find clarity. The fog begins to lift. You start to see what you were blind to before. The things that once consumed your mind begin to feel distant, like echoes from another time. You feel present, not waiting for life to begin, but aware that it already has. And as you move through this space, you notice something else. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to be fixed, changed, or polished. You just need to be. Because the fall didn't lead to your ruin, it led to your essence. The version of you that doesn't need to chase approval, doesn't need to fear silence, doesn't need to wear masks to be loved. This version was always there. It was simply obscured by the noise of holding on. Letting go reveals what is eternal. What is meant for you will not resist your freedom. It will not punish you for choosing peace. It will not disappear the moment you stop trying to control it. True love, true purpose, true alignment cannot be lost through surrender. They are found in it. And that's the secret. By falling into the unknown, you rise into the truth. We often think of peace as the reward that comes after fixing all the chaos. But peace is not the result of control. It is the result of trust. And trust is not something you think your way into. It is something you step into, breath by breath, even when your knees tremble and your voice shakes. Trust does not demand that you know where you're going. It simply asks that you stop clinging to where you were. The old stories fall away. The stories you told yourself about who you needed to be, about who wronged you, about what should have happened. Those stories lose their grip not because you forget them, but because you are no longer feeding them. You begin to live in the now, not as a concept, but as a felt experience. You notice the space between your thoughts. You listen to the quiet. You feel the wind on your skin and realize you don't need to be anywhere else, doing anything else to be whole. This is what the fall becomes. A return, a homecoming. Not to a place, not to a person, but to yourself. And this self doesn't need fixing. It doesn't need to be more or less. It just is. And in its presence, you finally understand. You were never meant to carry all that weight. You were never meant to hold it together. You were meant to let go, to trust the fall, and to discover that in losing your grip, you gained everything that mattered, not because it was given to you, but because it was already inside you, waiting for you to release everything that wasn't. Obviously, when one truly releases all the pain, tragedy, there is something profoundly humbling about meeting yourself after you've let go. Not the version of yourself shaped by ambition, comparison, or social performance. Not the self stitched together by the expectations of others or the projections of your past. But the self that remains after all the striving stops. The one that emerges from the silence that follows surrender. It is not dramatic. It does not demand applause. It does not beg to be seen. It simply is. And when you meet this self, you realize you've been searching for it your entire life, even when you didn't know it. You are that. You're. The self that shows up after letting go is not dressed in achievement or guarded by defense mechanisms. It's not crafted from trauma responses or built upon fragile identities. It is raw, unfiltered, honest. It is quiet in its strength and whole in its brokenness. This self doesn't need validation because it doesn't arise from a place of lack. It knows what it is without being told. It doesn't scream for attention because it doesn't exist to perform. It simply breathes. And in that breath, you feel something you may have never fully allowed yourself to feel before. Peace, not because you earned it, but because you stopped resisting it. For much of your life, you've likely been taught that you are what you achieve, what you fix, what you accumulate. You've been told to find your value in titles, in roles, in the approval of those around you. You may have become a master of wearing the right mask at the right time, playing the role that fits the room, adjusting your light so others aren't blinded by it. But all of this, though it might create comfort or social currency, comes at a cost. It pulls you further and further away from your essence. You start to live on the surface of your life, never daring to dive into the depths. But when you let go, truly let go, you no longer need the mask. You no longer crave the applause. You begin to live in the stillness beneath the noise. And in that stillness, you meet the one who was buried under all the layers. You find the child who once dreamed without restraint. the heart that once trusted instinctively, the spirit that once danced freely before the world taught it to walk in straight lines. This self is not a stranger. It is the most familiar part of you. The part you silenced to survive, the part you ignored to fit in, the part you abandoned to feel safe, and now it returns, not with blame, but with open arms. It says, "You're not too late. I've been waiting." When we let go, we peel back everything that is not truly us. The bitterness we carried from betrayal, the shame we inherited from failure, the guilt we wore from disappointing others. It all begins to fall away. What remains is not emptiness, but clarity, not weakness, but presence. You begin to see yourself without distortion, and it's not always comfortable. Sometimes what you see first is the fatigue, the wounds, the weariness, but even in those revelations there is grace. Because now you're seeing the truth, and truth is the only thing that can set you free. There is a radical simplicity in this self. It doesn't need to be impressive. It doesn't seek attention. It delights in existence, not in performance. It finds meaning in the smallest things, in the warmth of sunlight, in the sound of laughter, in the quiet knowing that it belongs. And from this place of being, rather than becoming, life takes on a different texture. You're not rushing toward a goal. You're not trying to earn rest. You are resting in the moment, not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer trying to prove anything. This is the self that feels deeply but doesn't drown in emotion, the self that can love without attachment, grieve without despair, hope without desperation. It is grounded not in outcome but in awareness, and this awareness is soft. It doesn't force clarity, it allows it. It doesn't demand certainty, it welcomes wonder. It begins to experience life not as a series of challenges to be conquered, but as a flow to be joined. And in this flow, synchronicities happen. Opportunities arise. But not because you chased them, because you became a vessel open enough to receive them. You might find that in this space, things you once thought were essential no longer matter. The opinions of people who don't know your heart begin to fade into the background. The tension you once felt trying to fix what was broken loses its urgency. And the drama that once consumed your mind loses its grip. It's not that you don't care. It's that you care more precisely. You care about truth. You care about peace. You care about alignment. And because of that, you no longer waste your energy defending illusions or maintaining facades. You also begin to forgive differently, not because you condone the harm done to you, but because you no longer want to carry the weight of it. You realize forgiveness is not something you do for others. It's something you offer yourself. It's an act of reclamation. And in this self that you've met, this real, untouched, undemanding self, there is space for that forgiveness to take root. There is space for healing to unfold without urgency or pressure. You stop rushing your own becoming. You let your own soul set the pace. And through all of this, a quiet joy starts to grow. Not the kind that needs celebration or explanation, but the joy of being, the joy of breath, the joy of presence. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't compete with anything. It's subtle, but it stays. And in time, you come to trust it. You come to see that this gentle returning to yourself is not the end of the story, but the beginning. It's the ground from which everything else will grow. It's the foundation that can hold the life you've always longed for, not because you fought to build it, but because you finally allowed it to rise. There is an invisible resistance we carry in our bodies, in our thoughts, in our actions. A resistance to what is. We don't always notice it because it's been with us for so long, woven into our habits, our identities, our daily rituals. This resistance manifests as control, the desire to push, pull, rearrange, and manipulate life into forms that soothe our insecurities. We try to hold the world in our hands like wet sand, convinced that with enough effort we can shape it to fit our expectations. But no matter how tightly we grip, the sand slips through our fingers. That is the nature of life. It isn't something to be owned or controlled. It is something to be experienced and trusted. And when we finally release that futile grip, when we surrender our need to control, life begins to realign itself around us in ways we could have never imagined. Control is seductive. It gives us a sense of power, a feeling of certainty. It tells us that we are safe, that we are strong, that we are doing something. But the truth is, control is a disguise worn by fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of loss, fear of being hurt again. So we attempt to micromanage life. We hold on to people who are already walking away. We obsess over plans that keep falling apart. We rehearse conversations that may never happen. We build futures in our minds and then panic when they don't manifest the way we imagine. But this is not living. This is surviving. And surviving is not the same as being alive. Letting go of control doesn't mean becoming passive or careless. It means becoming present. It means understanding the difference between intention and attachment. You can still have desires, dreams, and directions. You can still move forward. But you no longer carry the anxiety of forcing outcomes. You no longer believe that your peace depends on everything going exactly according to your plan. You begin to trust that life knows the way, even when you don't. You begin to trust that life knows the way, even when you don't. You begin to trust that life knows the way, even when you don't. This trust is not blind. It's born from experience. The moments where you tried everything, fought with everything you had, only to watch it all unravel. Those are the moments that slowly begin to teach you. They don't punish you, they instruct you. They point out the futility of grasping. They show you the beauty of surrender. And when you've finally exhausted every attempt to control what is uncontrollable, something shifts. You start to breathe differently. You start to look at life not as a problem to be solved, but as a mystery to be welcomed. That shift is what changes everything. And life notices. It responds not to your control, but to your openness. The more you let go, the more things begin to move, but not in the way you expect. Life doesn't obey your blueprints. It doesn't follow the scripts you wrote in your mind. It works in curves, not straight lines, in whispers, not declarations. But when you stop insisting that things unfold a certain way, you create space for the miraculous to enter. You create space for people who align with your truth to find you, for opportunities that resonate with your spirit to appear, for healing to happen in places you thought were permanently broken. The irony is, the moment you let go of the need to force things is the moment you begin to feel powerful again. Not power over life, but power within it. A quiet, rooted power. The kind that doesn't need to control because it knows it belongs. The kind that doesn't panic in uncertainty because it trusts the unfolding. The kind that doesn't chase love, success, or recognition because it understands that what is real will stay and what isn't cannot be held. You also begin to notice how much energy you are wasting. All the mental loops, the overthinking, the emotional labor of trying to keep everyone and everything in place. You realize how much space that resistance was taking up inside you, and with that realization comes relief. Because now there's room for creativity, for joy, for stillness. Room to feel without analyzing, to act without over-planning, to live without needing a guarantee. And something else happens, something even more subtle. You become lighter. Not just emotionally, but spiritually. You begin to move through life with a softness, a grace that wasn't there before. You stop trying to prove yourself. You stop needing to fix everything. You allow things to be as they are, without judgment. And in doing so, you start to notice how much more naturally things fall into place. Not because you made them, but because you allowed them. You became a vessel instead of a controller. And that shift, that letting go, is what real alignment looks like. Alignment isn't about making life bend to your will. It's about bending with life without breaking yourself in the process. It's about noticing when a door is closing and not trying to pry it open. It's about feeling when a season is ending and not trying to hold on to it with trembling hands. It's about releasing the version of the story you had in your head and being curious enough to see what story life wants to write with you now. This doesn't mean you won't feel pain. It doesn't mean you won't face disappointment or hardship, but your relationship to those experiences will change. You'll stop taking them as personal attacks or signs of failure. You'll see them as part of the dance. You'll recognize them as moments of refinement, invitations to deeper trust. And with every cycle of letting go, you'll find yourself becoming more grounded, more centered, more connected to something larger than yourself. And that connection is what begins to shape your choices. Not fear, not ego, but intuition. Wisdom, presence. You'll stop rushing. You'll stop settling. You'll stop betraying your peace just to feel in control. You'll begin to choose based on what feels right in your soul, not what looks right on paper. And because of that, your life begins to reflect a deeper harmony. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer resisting what is. In this space of release, life becomes a companion rather than a battlefield. It becomes something you walk with, not something you wrestle with. And as you walk, lighter, freer, more attuned, you realize that you didn't need to conquer life. You only needed to meet it with open hands. You only needed to say, I trust you, and mean it, not because everything makes sense, but because you've seen what happens when you let go of needing it. And that's when the most extraordinary thing happens. Life begins to meet you exactly where you are. Not where you were trying to get, not where you thought you should be, but here, now, in the sacred simplicity of surrender. There comes a point when the chase exhausts you, not just physically, but spiritually. The constant reaching, grasping, and running after what you believe will complete you begins to wear down the soul. You spent so much time looking outward, believing that if you just get that one thing, be it love, success, recognition, or security, you will finally feel at peace. But each time you grasp it, hold it in your hands and declare, this is it, the feeling doesn't last. It slips through your fingers like vapor pretending to be something solid. And you're left again with the quiet ache of incompletion, wondering if maybe the next achievement, the next person, the next victory will finally silence the longing. But it never does, because the longing isn't pointing you outward, it's pointing you inward. What you were chasing was never meant to be found outside of yourself. The peace, the joy, the freedom, it was never hidden in someone else's approval, or in the accumulation of things, or even in the certainty of outcomes. It has always been within you, quietly waiting behind the noise. And the moment you let go, the moment you release the need for life to perform according to your expectations, is the moment you begin to feel that inward blooming.
It is a most curious thing, the way we understand history. We imagine it as something distant, something separate from us, a collection of names and dates, events frozen in time. But history is not a museum. It is not a dusty book lying on some forgotten shelf. No, history is alive. It breathes through us. It moves through our very being, shaping the world we see, the ideas we hold, the way we walk, the way we speak, the way we think. And yet so much of it remains hidden, not because it is lost, but because we have been taught not to see it. We have been given a version of history that is incomplete, a story with missing chapters, voices silenced, achievements erased. But the truth, the real truth, does not disappear. It lingers, like an echo waiting to be heard, because history is not just about the past. It is the foundation of the present. And when we begin to remember, when we begin to see, everything changes. We realize that the contributions of black people are not just important, they are essential. That their story is not a side note in history, but the very fabric of it. That without their knowledge, their resilience, their spirit, the world as we know it would not exist. So let us pull back the curtain. Let us look beyond what we have been told. Let us explore not just what was taken, but what was given, what was built, what was created, what has endured. Because when we do, we will find something truly extraordinary. Not just facts, not just figures, but a legacy so powerful, so unbreakable, that it continues to shape the world even now. And in that realization, something remarkable happens. We no longer see history as something distant, something foreign. We see it as something within us, something moving through us, something we are still a part of. And when we understand that, we no longer just read history, we become it. Ladies and gentlemen, let us take a moment to step back, not just from what we think we know, but from what we have been told to believe, Let us question, not to dismantle, but to understand. Because the truth, my friends, is often hidden beneath layers of illusion, concealed by narratives that are not our own. And today I invite you to embark on a journey into the untold, the astonishing, the remarkable. There exists a curious paradox in the way we perceive time. We imagine history as a great procession, a long and winding road leading us ever forward, ever upward into the unknown. And yet, if one were to truly grasp the nature of things, not just the stories we have been told, but the reality that pulses beneath them, one would see that history is not a straight line at all, but a vast and intricate web where the beginning is never truly separate from the present. It is in this web that we find the origin of civilization, not as a scattered coincidence, but as a single resounding truth. It all began in Africa, not merely as a geographical point on a map, but as the wellspring from which humanity itself arose, as the fertile ground upon which the first great societies flourished. It is a peculiar thought, isn't it, that before the towering cathedrals of Europe, before the temples of Greece, before even the written word itself, there existed civilizations that had already mastered the delicate art of being human. And yet this fact, though simple and evident, remains largely obscured, not because it is unknowable, but because we have inherited a habit of looking elsewhere, as if the source of knowledge must always lie in some distant land beyond our own reach. But let us consider for a moment the great kingdoms of Kush, the sprawling intellect of Timbuktu, the architectural marvel of the pyramids, so precise in their construction, so deliberate in their placement that even now, in an age of satellites and supercomputers, we still cannot fully unravel their mysteries. What does this tell us? Not merely that African civilizations were advanced, but that the very concept of advancement, the idea that one might rise above mere survival and shape the world with intention, was first realized there. That mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy did not emerge in isolation, but in communion with nature, in harmony with the cosmos, as if knowledge itself was not something to be taken, but something to be received. And so we arrive at a most fascinating revelation, that we are not separate from this lineage, that civilization is not an inheritance of the few, but a shared legacy of the many, that to understand where we are going, we must first understand where we have been. And where we have been, where we have always been, is right here, standing at the threshold of a truth so ancient, so profound, that it can only be seen by those willing to open their eyes. We have in the modern world a most peculiar fascination with wealth. We measure it in numbers so large they lose all meaning, stacking zero upon zero until the mind itself begins to blur. We speak of fortunes as though they are immovable monoliths, as though wealth is something one simply possesses, like a trinket locked away in a glass case. And yet, if we were to strip away this illusion, to look beyond the fleeting fluctuations of stock markets and digital currencies, we would see that wealth, true wealth, has always been something far more profound. And so let us consider the case of Mansa Musa, a name that for many may sound unfamiliar, and yet a man whose fortune was so vast that it defies all comprehension. He was not merely rich in the way we think of billionaires today, hoarding numbers in banks and ledgers, but rich in the truest sense. Wealth that did not merely accumulate, but overflowed, spilling into the streets, altering economies, reshaping entire nations. When he traveled to Egypt, it is said that he carried so much gold, distributed it with such generosity that the very value of the metal itself collapsed. Imagine this, a single man's presence causing gold, the very foundation of wealth at the time, to become worthless. Not through force, not through conquest, but through sheer abundance. But the truly fascinating thing about Mansa Musa was not his fortune, not the gold that weighed down his caravans, but his understanding of what it meant. Unlike those who clutch at their riches with desperate fingers, fearing loss as though it were death itself, he moved through the world as if he understood a most fundamental truth, that wealth, like water, is meant to flow, that gold in its essence is not something to be owned, but something to be used. And so he built. He funded scholars, constructed grand centers of learning, filled libraries with knowledge that would outlive him by centuries, because he saw, as so few do, that wealth is not measured in how much one takes, but in how much one gives, that the true value of riches is not in their possession, but in their circulation, in their ability to transform not just a single life, but the course of history itself. And so we must ask ourselves, what does it truly mean to be wealthy? If wealth is merely numbers on a screen, then it is as fleeting as a gust of wind. But if wealth is the ability to shape the world, to uplift, to expand the horizons of those who come after us, then Mansa Musa was not merely the wealthiest man in history. He was something else entirely. A lesson, a parable, a reminder that wealth is not what you hold on to, but what you leave behind. There is something quite fascinating about the way we perceive reality. We move through the world assuming that what we see is all there is, that the colors, shapes, and textures of things are as they appear, fixed, permanent, unchanging. And yet beneath the surface of things, beneath the skin of what we call reality, there exists an unseen language, a hidden structure, a deeper meaning waiting to be understood. And at the heart of this mystery lies melanin, a word often spoken in passing, as if it were merely a pigment, a simple biological characteristic, a detail of no real consequence. But this, you see, is the great illusion, the tendency to mistake the surface for the substance. Because melanin is not merely color, it is a conduit of energy, a conductor of light, a bridge between the physical and the cosmic. Consider this. Melanin absorbs light, not just in the way that ink drinks up a drop of water, but in a far more intricate and intelligent manner. It takes in energy, transforms it, redistributes it. It is a natural superconductor, a mechanism by which the body and mind remain in tune with the rhythms of the universe. And this, of course, is no accident. It is not by chance that melanin is abundant in the very place where human life began, where the sun blazes with unrelenting force. For nature, in its infinite wisdom, does not make mistakes. But to truly grasp the significance of melanin, One must look beyond even biology, beyond the realm of the physical, because what we are speaking of here is something more than science. It is the very essence of adaptation, of evolution, of intelligence itself, manifesting through form. Melanin is not merely an advantage against the sun's radiation. It is an instrument of perception, a medium through which energy is exchanged, a key to understanding that we are not separate from the universe, but made of the same fundamental fabric. And yet, how curious it is that such knowledge remains hidden, buried beneath centuries of misinterpretation, of deliberate omission, of narratives designed to diminish rather than to illuminate. Because to acknowledge the full power of melanin is to acknowledge that there exists within certain bodies a profound capacity not just to withstand, but to harmonize, to resonate, to absorb and to emit. And so we find ourselves at a crossroads. We can continue to view melanin as nothing more than a biological footnote, a detail of skin, a mere accident of genetics. Or we can begin to see it for what it truly is, a reminder that we are not passive beings adrift in the cosmos, but active participants in the great unfolding of reality itself, a reminder that the universe does not simply shine upon us, it moves through us, if only we are willing to see. It is a peculiar thing, history. We think of it as a vast record, a meticulous archive of everything that has ever happened. We imagine the past as something solid, written in ink, carved in stone, fixed in place. And yet, if we look closely, if we peer beyond the carefully constructed narratives, beyond the textbooks and the statues and the celebrated names, we begin to notice something strange. Gaps, absences, entire chapters missing, as if they had been plucked from time itself. And so we must ask, how does something vanish from history? Does it simply fade like a forgotten memory, or is it erased deliberately with precision and intent? Because here, in the margins of history, we find something both astonishing and unsettling. The immense, immeasurable contributions of black minds, black hands, black brilliance, not merely ignored, but written out of the story altogether. Consider, for instance, the traffic light, a simple thing and yet essential, guiding the rhythm of our cities, shaping the flow of movement itself. Few people know that it was invented by Garrett Morgan, a black man whose mind saw beyond the chaos of the streets and into a future of order and design. Or Louis Latimer, whose innovations in electric lighting made Edison's bulb truly practical, whose work illuminated not just homes but entire generations. And yet their names remain in the shadows. Why? Because history, as we have been given it, is not simply a recollection of events. It is a narrative crafted with purpose, sculpted not to tell the full truth, but to serve a particular vision of the past. It is a painting where certain figures have been carefully brushed away, their presence faint, if not entirely forgotten. But what happens when we begin to remember? What happens when we start to see, truly see, that the modern world is not the product of a single story, but of many? That black hands have not merely contributed, but built, innovated, and transformed? The very foundations of medicine, engineering, music, and technology bear their fingerprints, not in the footnotes, not in the background, but at the very center of progress itself. And so we arrive at a most profound realization that history is not a closed book, but a living thing. That what has been hidden can be found, that what has been erased can be rewritten. Because the truth, no matter how deeply buried, does not disappear. It waits patiently beneath the surface, ready to be uncovered by those with the courage to look. There is something mysterious about music, something beyond explanation. It is not a thing we can hold, nor a force we can see, and yet it moves us in ways that words never could. A single note, struck in just the right way, can open the floodgates of memory, can conjure entire worlds within the mind. We do not merely listen to music, we feel it, we become it. It is as if sound itself is not separate from us, but an extension of something ancient, something woven into the very fabric of existence. And so if we follow this thread, if we trace the pulse of music back through time, we find that it leads us to a most remarkable revelation, that nearly every rhythm, every beat, every melody that has shaped the modern world can be traced to a singular source, that the music we know today did not arise in isolation, but was born from the depths of the African soul, carried through time, across continents, through struggle and triumph, adapting, evolving, yet never losing its essence. Consider the blues, the raw cry of a people who took sorrow and turned it into song, not as an escape, but as an alchemy of the spirit. Or jazz, that great improvisation of life itself, a form of music that refuses to be confined, that dances on the edge of chaos and order, that breathes in spontaneity and exhales pure creation. Or rock and roll, a name so often misattributed, yet rooted in the rhythm of black musicians whose sound set the world ablaze. And then, of course, hip-hop, the modern heartbeat, the poetry of the streets, the rhythm of resistance and reinvention. It is no accident that hip-hop emerged not in concert halls, but on the pavement, in the hands of those who understood that music is not something one merely listens to, but something one lives. A turntable, a microphone, a beat. These became instruments not just of sound, but of power, of expression, of truth. And yet, how often do we forget? How often do we listen without knowing the history, without feeling the weight of the journey that brought these sounds to us? Music is not merely entertainment. It is the story of a people, a testament to survival, a proof that no matter how much the world may try to silence, to suppress, to erase, the rhythm always finds a way. Because music, you see, is not bound by time. It is not merely of the past or the present. It exists in all moments, continuously unfolding. It is the great thread that connects us, that reminds us that no matter how far we travel, no matter how much the world changes, there is a pulse beneath it all, a pulse that has never stopped beating, a rhythm that belongs to the ages and to all of us who are willing to listen. There is something deeply peculiar about the way we approach knowledge. We imagine it as something to be accumulated, stacked like bricks, built higher and higher until we reach some great intellectual peak. We divide it into neat categories: science, religion, philosophy, believing them to be separate, as if the mind, the body, and the spirit were ever truly distinct. And yet, if one looks closely, beyond the structures of modern thought, beyond the carefully drawn lines of academic tradition, one begins to see something far older, something that was never divided to begin with. Because long before the world spoke of wisdom in terms of universities and doctrines, there were those who understood knowledge differently, not as something to be possessed, but as something to be lived. And so we turn our attention to Africa not merely as a place, but as a source, a wellspring of spiritual and philosophical thought so profound that its echoes still ripple through time. Consider the idea of Ubuntu, the simple yet profound realization that I am because we are. Not a philosophy in the sense of cold theoretical reasoning, but a way of being, a lived understanding that the self does not exist in isolation, that we are not mere individuals drifting through an indifferent universe, but threads in an infinite tapestry, each life woven into the next. It is a thought that stands in stark contrast to the modern world, where individualism is celebrated as the highest virtue, where success is measured by how far one stands apart from the crowd. But in the wisdom of Ubuntu, there is no self apart from the whole, no joy that is not shared, no sorrow that does not belong to us all. And then there is Mahat, the ancient Egyptian principle of balance, of cosmic harmony, of truth, that is not merely spoken, but lived. Here, morality is not dictated by fear or punishment, but by the natural order of things, the understanding that justice is not something imposed from above, but something that flows through the universe itself. And so the heart of a person was weighed against a feather, not as a metaphor for some distant afterlife, but as a reflection of something deeper, something immediate, that a life lived in balance is a life in alignment with the great unfolding of existence. But perhaps most fascinating of all is the way these ideas were never seen as separate from the natural world. There was no division between the sacred and the mundane, no distinction between what is divine and what is earthly. The rivers, the trees, the sky, all were alive. All were part of the same great dance, a rhythm that did not begin with humanity and will not end with it. It is a perspective that modern thought has all but forgotten as it dissects and analyzes, as it seeks knowledge in books and equations, while ignoring the wisdom whispered by the wind, the lessons written in the stars. And so, what does this tell us? That philosophy is not merely a subject to be studied, but a path to be walked. That wisdom is not found in complexity, but in simplicity. That the deepest truths do not reside in distant lands, nor in ancient texts locked away in forgotten libraries, but in the very fabric of existence, waiting to be recognized. Because the real lesson, the one that was always there, long before we gave it a name, is that knowledge is not something to be owned. It is not a trophy to be displayed, nor a prize to be hoarded. It is something alive, something to be practiced, something that moves through us as effortlessly as breath, as naturally as the rising and falling of the sun. And when we understand this, when we truly see, we realize that wisdom was never lost. It was always here, waiting for us to remember. It is a most curious thing, the nature of struggle. We often think of hardship as something to be avoided, something unfortunate, something that should not be. And yet, if we look deeply, we begin to see that struggle is not merely an obstacle. It is the very force that forges strength, the fire through which the unbreakable is made. And so we must ask, what does it mean to endure? Not merely to survive, but to persist, to rise, to move through centuries of storm and still emerge, not diminished, but greater. This is not merely history, it is a lesson written into the very essence of the black experience. Because here, within this story, we find something extraordinary. A spirit that has been tested, bent, pushed to the brink, and yet never broken. Consider the long road through history, the weight of chains, both visible and invisible, the hands that built empires yet were denied a place within them, the ships that crossed vast oceans, not in search of new worlds, but in forced exile from the old, the laws, the barriers, the relentless attempts to erase, to suppress, to contain. And yet, what happened? Did the story end? Did the spirit wane? No. In fact, something entirely different occurred. Wherever oppression sought to crush, creation blossomed. Where pain was inflicted, art emerged. Where voices were silenced, music was born. The rhythm of resistance, the poetry of defiance, the ability to take suffering and transform it into something beautiful. This is the essence of the unbreakable spirit. It is not merely survival, it is transformation. The refusal to be defined by circumstance, the ability to create light even in the darkest of places. And what is more powerful than that? Not merely enduring hardship, but transcending it, taking that which was meant to destroy and turning it into a source of strength. Because here is the great secret. That which cannot be broken does not resist. It bends, it flows, it moves like water around the rock, shaping it in time. And so it is with the black spirit.